Welcome to On Air Episode 1 with Phoenician Hunter and Tesla 369. The Secret World of Words, how the English language is used to control and manipulate. One thing I want to ask is, you've written a book which talks about words, I guess. I don't want to go into too much detail, but what an interesting read. Can you just maybe explain how you came about that topic?
Yeah, well, I've always been sort of interested in words and their meanings, their hidden meanings, I guess. Um, I was inspired by Jordan Maxwell to begin with, I guess. I guess he was the first that I'd come across using these maritime themed words like, the docks and the berth and the connection to commerce. But there were others as well, and I think I mentioned them in the book at the back of the book. I just kept hearing all these various researchers using words and their connection to the legal system and to commerce, but no one was really explaining why they were using these words or how they affect us, or like what was the purpose of them modifying the English language almost to have these maritime themes running through it. And then I started looking into other things. Okay, all right, why words? How do they affect us? So then I thought, okay, I gathered enough sort of little bits of information from various researchers, various different fields, and then I thought, okay, I think I've got an outline of what's going on here, and that's where I sort of came up with the idea of the book and putting all these themes together to explain what was going on with these words and the maritime nature of them.
Can you maybe explain when you're talking about maritime nature?
First of all, you've read the book, so you know it's purposely written in a simple, easy to understand format, and it was aimed. I wasn't aiming at people like yourself, who's already got a little background in what people would term conspiracy theories. I was aiming for the normies, because what people call the normies, I guess, people who wouldn't generally look in, question anything, basically, look into this stuff. They're just, yeah, okay, that exists, but it doesn't bother me, or I'm not affected by it. So I wanted that they were my target audience, because I just feel if we're going to ever change anything, they're the people who have to wake up to this stuff.
Even with my knowledge of etymology and where words have come
Mm.
from, I found there were actually some nice little nuggets of information there that started to put all the pieces together about where we are at this point in humanity. Now, that might be a little too deep for some, but I want you to try and delve into just maybe some examples of that. And you've spoken about Jordan Maxwell. We're going to quickly touch on the maritime, what you refer to as maritime and water-based, the nature of water-based words. But it's actually not only is it an interesting read, it's a very easy read. So it's not a book where you've got like War and Peace. It's actually quite entertaining, if that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, I purposely left out masses of data and information, but I've given enough for people to look into that if they wanted to. So in terms of, for instance, when I speak about or just touch on, music or frequency and the effect of that on matter, like plants and water, I haven't presented vast amount of information there, because that's not what it's about. You want to do that, you can follow that path and do that research yourself. The other thing that fascinates me and always has is people's beliefs. Why do people have the thoughts they have and the ideas and the beliefs that they maintain? Where do they come from? Where do they originate? So that's always fascinated me. And I think that probably was more important to me than the words, because they're connected. Because, okay, where do people's beliefs and thoughts come from?
Generational, I would think. It's
Okay,
what they've been taught from generation to
exactly.
generation.
Yeah, what they've been told or what they've read. And again, where does that originate? It originates from words. Your ideas, your thoughts, and beliefs that are spoken, they're spoken into reality. Because you've heard them spoken by your parents or your peers, your teachers. You've read it in a book. Your priests. To me, that was something I wanted to explore as well.
Okay, so maybe give us one or two examples, all right? Or do you want to jump into the examples, or would you prefer to talk about your influences like Jordan Maxwell, for example, and talk about maritime? What does maritime mean? Or do you want to talk
Oh,
about? Yep.
okay. We'll go back a bit. We'll go back to words and why do they affect us in the way that they do? Words, what are they? They're a vibrate. The spoken word is just a sound, and then we go back and break that down. What's a sound? So it's a vibration or a frequency. So then I said, okay, so if that's what it is, how does a frequency affect us? For instance, when someone is angry with you and says hateful things, they don't have to physically do anything to you. It's just by the words, they affect you. They affect your emotions. So I'm thinking, okay, so the words can affect us either in a positive way or a negative way. Again, that's done through frequency. So how does that work?
The example that I've recently seen on that was this guy to camera with his dog. He says, "Look how my dog reacts when I speak, when I say the same thing to him, but I use a different tone." So he said, "You're a good boy. We're going to go for a walk. I'm going to feed you soon. You're the love of my life." Now, he said that in two ways. He said that aggressively, and he said that in a loving way, and you saw the reaction of the animal and how the animal reacted in both instances. So you're right. Frequency and vibration means a lot. It's not necessarily what you say; it's the frequency or vibration that
Yeah,
comes out when you say
exactly.
it.
Exactly. And then I'll say, okay, so why do they affect us? There was a book, it's called The Secret Life of Plants, which I mentioned, and they were looking at plants and the way they're affected by certain frequencies generated by music. So playing, for instance, classical music would have a positive effect on these plants. Playing hard rock had a negative effect where they would almost rot and die, whereas with the classical music they will blossom. Okay, but why is this? What's it affecting in the plant? And I said, okay, but plants are made up of what, 90%, 95% water. So it's actually having an effect on water, right? So what is the matter that it's affecting this frequency? So then I broke that down. I go, okay, and then you look at humans, and what are humans made up of? Again, mostly water, 65%, they say. You look at the planet, what's the planet made of? 70% water. So, okay, so if you're going to affect the most prominent matter in existence, it would be water. And how would you affect it? By frequency. So that's where the words play into this. And then I looked into the works of a Japanese researcher, which I mentioned again, Mr. Emoto,
That's the one
who,
I was going to mention as well. But yeah,
yeah,
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
well, yeah, again, he was experimenting with water crystals. So he would photograph water crystals exposed to different sounds. And again, what you were saying earlier about the tone and the tone and particular words changed the structure of the crystals that he was seeing, under the microscope to these beautiful crystal star formations. And the opposite was, I don't know, this sort of blob basically. And you can see those. I've put some of those illustrations in the book. Yeah, so then I just sort of came to the conclusion that okay, so frequency is affecting, matter in terms of the plants, and it's affecting humans as well. So what better way to manipulate us? Because if you manipulate the water with certain frequencies of the spoken language, words, then you obviously affect our behavior, our emotions, human emotions. So then I said, okay, well, then words do affect us. But why are they using these water-based words then all the time? And I heard a researcher once say it's because they want to keep us in a water-based reality, but he never explained why. They want to keep us in there. Maybe it's because if they keep us in a water-based reality, then we're more easily manipulated.
Okay, so how does that? How do you connect that? And I think it's important to maybe touch on this maritime thing. Do you want to talk about that or not?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
Because I think that's a nice little segue into maybe giving some examples, not a lot, but some examples like current C, birth certificate, that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
okay. Just to step back a bit, and
Yeah.
then we'll lead into that. So, I'll just give you an example of a word, and in English has a lot of these words where, they have either a hidden meaning or double meaning. So the word sentence, which is a set of words, is a sentence. Or in a court of law, what is a sentence? It's a punishment when you're found guilty of a crime, right? So the mind, when it hears the word sentence, which one is it using to identify with, Because when you speak that word, the frequency of that word is the same, right? But it affects you differently. Your emotions are going to be, okay, a sentence is just a set of words. Oh my God, I'm being punished here. So I found there was, the English language was abundant with these words, more so than any other language too. So it was either created that way to begin with, or the language was manipulated into having these double meanings.
I would bet on the latter, but anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, no, that was my finding as well. But I mean, that's for another. There's a whole history about that, and
Sure.
when that happened, why it happened. So the way I look at words and language then is simply like a program or instructions, similar to the way our computers have an operating system. The computer is the hardware. It can't run anything. It needs software to run. And what's the software? The software is the language, the operating system. We're the same. So, humans or plants or animals, we're the machine, we're the hardware. Our spoken language is our operating, that operates us into what we think, what we feel, what we do. So, I mean, if you can control that, you're basically controlling a slave race. You can manipulate people. Then that's when it goes back to ideas. And I say, okay, so this is why people behave the way they do and have the beliefs they do. I mean, you come into the earth not knowing, they say you're not knowing. So how would a newborn know any of this stuff unless they're trained to believe the things they believe? Again, done by language, the operating system.
While you take a pause there, in reference to the plant research, there was a study done in June of 2021 titled The Psychological and Physiological Effect in Plant Growth and Health by Using Positive and Negative Words, printed in the International Journal of Innovative Research in Technology. People can look this up. The outcome was that in one room, kind words were spoken to plants. In the second, harsh words were spoken. And in the third, there was pin drop silence. The results basically showed that the plants which were exposed to kind words grew a lot more than the other two. And in actual
Yeah.
fact, the room where the pin drop silence was, the plants actually were near dead. So that's the research that I was referring to earlier.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it sounds similar to the book I mentioned earlier, The Secret Life of Plants, I think it was. So then I thought, okay, this is almost like magic. And then, you look at magic and what they tell you what magic is. What's magic? What do magicians do? They cast spells. Spells, that's what we do, spellings. It's all there when you look at it. It's almost like they tell you, they're not trying to hide it. It's in plain view, but for some reason people just take it for granted, or oh, that's just the way it is, or it's coincidence, but I don't believe in coincidences. I think it's got a purpose, and I have proven that. I mean, also magicians use, well, what do they call the books that they use? Spell books. So then you look at books in general. So I mean, you look at books, and I have this. I say in the book, that all books are spell books. Why? Why are they spelled? Because they all contain spellings and they all have what? An effect on the reader. So where do we get our ideas from, our beliefs? Again, from the spells that are cast from the books or the words spoken, the spoken word or the reading.
Yeah, so
Going back,
here is a good time to explain, because I don't think we've done this yet. Explain about maritime, about
yeah,
admiralty, about how a lot of our words are based around
yeah.
maritime law.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that a researcher had mentioned that we are connected to the water and the language connects us, sort of almost keeps us there as vessels. So, for instance, there's a lot of words that end in the word ship, relationship, friendship, partnership, citizenship.
This is what you were
Yeah.
talking about before about maritime, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So, in fact, we've been designated vessels or ships, right? So the human being in the language is considered a ship. Now, why are we considered a ship? Which, I mean, I don't go into this in the book because I just felt it was a step too far for people looking into this stuff early on. It's probably almost like part two. But I did write a post about that recently for those interested.
And we'll put reference to your Substack blog, which is, again, very interesting reading towards the end of our discussion.
So the reason we've been designated ships is because we've been placed in an invisible sea, which they call the invisible sea of commerce. And that's where it gets, you were saying earlier, it has to do with banking and commerce and ships. And so we're connected to the water because they want us in this sea of commerce to do what? Trade, to purchase, sales. Otherwise, it won't work for them. We're not participating in this world of trade and commerce. As you can see today, what is the world today? It's like a big shopping center, isn't it? It's like a big business. They've locked us into this world of materialism. So you couldn't do that without having the right instructions or program. So that's why the words were created in the first place.
So give our listeners just one or two examples of maritime-based words that could make sense to them. For example, a birth certificate.
So when you're born, you come out of your mother's birth canal. So they use all these words. You're given a birth certificate by the doctor. Now, in shipping terms, they have a very similar way of saying, okay, when a ship enters the dock, it's called a berth, and the captain needs to provide what is called a birth certificate. So we're using the same terminology to describe two completely different things here. We're using the birth of a human, or the birth of a vessel, a ship, as it docks at a port, because it
And
needs
that
to have the same effect. That's the reason it needs to have.
and that's what
You were
really
going to.
caught my interest in this subject in particular, but also why I enjoyed reading your book, because it goes into much more detail and it has a myriad of words that people will step back and think, wow, that is just uncanny or coincidental or purposely done. In any case, they're great examples. And I think that people should download your book and read more about this because, as I said, it's actually very interesting reading.
Thanks. Then I was looking into, language and what was the first phonetic language. And the so-called experts tell us that it came from the Phoenician language or the Phoenician alphabet, which they verify as the oldest. So then I looked, this set me off on looking in who are these guys? Who are the Phoenicians? And the Phoenicians actually never really called themselves Phoenicians. They referred to themselves as Canaanites. And then I looked into that word. And what does that word mean? If you break up that word, it actually just means trader or a merchant. Back then, a merchant was also a banker. So that makes sense that, the people who gave us this language were merchants. So, I mean, this spell has been going on for a very long time. English is just the latest version of it. So then, look, what does the word merchant means? You break that up, mer, which is water or sea, and then chant, which is what? It's like someone who makes an enchantment, casts a spell. So they're casting water spells on people. That's what the word, breaks down into. So it makes sense to me that the ones that are creating this reality, right? This reality of the sea of commerce were bankers or merchants.
Mm.
So then we go into what you were mentioning before about commerce. And I mean, you just look at the word acquire. Acquire's got it's water, aqua. So acquire, and the whole system, the commercial system, is full of these words as well. Sail, when you put something up for sale, or a vessel has sails in order to, navigate the sea.
I would love to jump into the logos of the three biggest asset managers on the planet, but that again is for another discussion. That to me was in your latest article, in your latest blog, that and knowing about these three asset management companies, I had never taken the time to look at their logos closely. But looking at their logos now, it was literally a wow moment.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the people behind this system don't hide it from anyone. I mean, they show you this in their words, in their signs, their symbols. It's all there for you to, to look at and interpret. But I mean, I guess most people just either interpret it incorrectly or just not interested in looking at it. So what you're referring to there is the three largest asset managers in the world, which fund managers, which are Vanguard, BlackRock, and
State Street.
State Street. That's it. And BlackRock just grew out of First Boston Corporation, and all three of those, all their logos have sailing ships as their symbols.
And that was the
Yeah.
wow moment for me. And in fact, you go one step further, and you could call them pirate ships if you really want to delve
Yeah.
any deeper.
Yeah, pirates. I mean, that's what they're basically doing.
That's exactly what they're
They're
doing.
pirateering.
That's exactly what they're doing. It's modern day piracy.
Yeah, exactly. So then, I mean, in my book, I move on to, the education system as well, and how, you go to school, and school is the definition of a group of fish. Again, we're kept in the water. And why does one go to school? To be illuminated, I guess, switched on. When we go to school and we learn, we participate in what they call lessons. So to me, I look at that word and it's backwards, because on means to turn on a light. The word for the sun and light was on. So if we go to school, why are we getting less on? Shouldn't we be getting more on? But then what's a more on? You know, it's backwards to me. It doesn't sound right. But it works if they're trying to tell you you're going to school and you're not going to get any smarter, basically.
That's right.
You're going to school to be indoctrinated, so you're not getting, they're right. You're getting less on. You're getting lessons.
And what did John D. Rockefeller say in 1901? I want a nation of workers, not a nation of thinkers.
Exactly. Yeah.
But again, that's another discussion about the education system and how that's been set up to benefit the few.
Well, then, yeah, also, people need to realize that our whole education system and the ability that we have to read and write is very recent in terms of the masses being able to read and write. Records tell us only 200 years ago, it was as little as 12% of the people could read and write. So they can basically have invented our entire history very recently. I mean, who would check it?
And how would they check it?
If
What
you couldn't
references would
couldn't read
they
and
would
write,
they
they could easily manage some of that. They could easily manage creating the reality that they wanted for future generations. Then we get in the book, I moved on to, forms of government. I mean, that word is self-evident. Government, mente is the mind. So now that's another thing. Learning, having another language helped me decipher the English language, because the English language is made up of a variety of different, or was influenced by a number of languages, predominantly Latin, French, and I mean, knowing Italian and a little bit of Latin helped me see these words and break them apart. So, with government, obviously, like I said, mente and control. So govern is control, ment is mind. So what the government is doing is basically controlling the mind of the masses. Basically, they're telling you. And parliament, the word parliament is to speak your mind. So politicians are there speaking their mind, supposedly on behalf of people who elected them. But we know that's not the case. And then we moved on to religion, which is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, because it's the one thing that people will not question. And if this operation affects every aspect of life, your thoughts, your operating system, it's going to affect religion. I mean, a religion is a part of it. It's not different. It's not separate. It's not divinely, thrust on us. It comes from the same source. It comes from words. It comes from a book. Yes, people say, yes, but God spoke it. No, he didn't speak it. A priest did. Who's the priest? Go back and you'll see the priests were the merchants. It's the same people. It's the same magicians, casting spells. But again, that's a hard one. It's a hard one for people to accept. So, you just look at the word religion and it tells you what it is. So you break that up. RE means afresh or anew or once again. And the word legion, what's legion mean? A vast number of people or things. So what they're doing is reprogramming the people again. So for religion, because again, Jordan Maxwell would say there's nothing new under the sun. These religions, the religions we have today are just adaptations of older religions. And I'm not saying there's no truth in them, because there is. And I think that's why they resonate with so many people, is because they say, oh, no, but it's true. I know it's true. And they're right. They know it's true. But they're also got falsehoods in them too. And they're created as a form of mind control. It's up to the individual if they want to investigate it and look into it themselves to see, okay, what is true and what isn't, what can I take from this? Because I'm not saying not to take anything away from it, but just to be mindful of its origins and why it was created and, how it affects you and how it affects, people in general.
I completely agree with that. And when you go back to what you were saying at the start about words and spelling and spells, religion is probably the most difficult spell to break.
Yeah. I mean, I come across it daily. People will question everything and anything, science, doctors, government. But when it comes to that, no, that's the one thing that, obviously hasn't been affected for them. If you're going to question, and then they call themselves truth seekers. That's the other thing. Truth seeker to a certain degree, or what? I mean, you're not going through that gate. You're going to leave that one shut, open all the others.
Well, I genuinely believe that there is some sense of awakening of all this. And although it's a minority, I still think we're on that path where, what you've been saying the last half an hour will make a lot more sense to a lot more people as time continues.
I mean, when you look at the word believe as well, it contains the words lie in it. So, I mean, I'm not saying from my experience that God does not exist. I mean, this is a topic for something a lot bigger, but just wanted to touch on it because it offends a lot of people. But what people have done is they've adopted the merchant's version or vision or idea of what God is with these books. Predominantly like, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, especially Judaism or the Old Testament. I mean, you've adopted their version, so the merchant's version of it. And again, I'm not saying from my personal experience that something greater doesn't exist, but why would you want someone else to describe that for you, to define that? People need religion. I think they do. Or maybe not religion, they need faith. I guess.
Faith, that's something. Right.
Right. Why do you need a manual for it? Why do you need a nice little, book with, contents pages and references? And why would you want a reference book to something spiritual? It makes no sense. That's never made any sense to me.
Well, meditation is a form of prayer.
Exactly. I mean, that's what prayer is to a certain extent, I guess, but words aren't necessary. It's a connection. It should be a connection of the mind, really, and that's what meditation is. But I mean, it's a topic, I guess, that we can discuss.
Yeah, I think religion is, warrants a separate podcast or two or three. But on the going on from what you've just discussed about religion and belief, maybe delve in a little bit more than that.
Like another one, I mean, and the Bible has a lot of stories that you can interpret. If you actually, someone once said to me that the Bible is a book of the mind, and don't take it literally. It's not about places and people and time, events. It's about the mind. And I'll give you an example of one. So when, the story that everyone knows about, Jesus, driving the money changers out of the temple. There's another way to read that. It's not physical. He didn't go into a temple where there was bankers in there or money changers and he physically threw them out. So words again, you need to look at the words and they'll give you the clues that you need to know to decipher what's being said. So what are where are your temples? What's between your temples? The mind. So the temples are the side of, the left hand side of your head. And inside the
That
temples is what the mind. So what the character Jesus is saying? He's saying to drive the money from the temple. So don't be obsessed with money. That's the way and not just myself, people who I've learned from interpret it that way. And the Bible again is full of stuff like this. So the Bible is good. It's a good book if it's understood correctly.
metaphorically rather than literally.
Exactly. And I believe in the Bible wasn't meant to be given to the layman to read. It wasn't. It was actually punishable if anyone was caught reading it. It was for the priests to read and them to explain it to you. So again, that was a recent event where the Bible was given, and it was one of the first books that was taught in schools too. So when they decided to make all this available in the program, they wanted people to be able to read and write. The Bible was one of the first books that they used as their spell book.
Well, let's hold that discussion for another time. I think
Yeah, okay.
it's worthy. I think religion in itself, without
Yeah, yeah.
being too
Okay, and then
biased. But
yeah,
yeah,
no,
so let's continue on again the wonderment of what you've written in your book and
okay.
how it translates and how words translate to it.
So yeah, and then I continued looking at words and the influence they have, and then you look at how do we receive most of our words or spells or programming. Okay, most people would get it through what? Television. You break up that word, it's a vision. Whose vision? Someone's telling you their vision, television. And television is there to do what? Broadcast what? A program, and then you look at news reporters. What are reporters called? Traditionally, they were called anchors. We don't use that term anymore. Why? Why? To anchor, to keep you there, to keep you fixated.
But it also ties back to maritime anchor, the word.
Exactly. It's all water. It has to be connected to water. And, the word mainstream news, again, it's stream, water, let the water flow. All these terms are there. They're also being incorporated into the modern system as well, because today we get most of our information where? Online. So we'll delve into some of the words there as well. When you go fishing, you catch a fish how? With a line, fishing line. So then, we're using the same maritime words online. And when you go online, what do? You say you're surfing the net. Again, surfing the net. Then what's the net used for? To catch fish. I mean, we can go on and on.
And interesting how
Um,
these words have come about in our vernacular and they just happen to be maritime
Well,
or sea
see
based.
who's creating these words. Whenever there's an invention, someone needs to create a word to describe what that new thing is. You didn't have internet, 200 years ago, so someone had to create that word. And it gets approved. It goes into the dictionaries. I mean, I don't understand the process. Who are the people? The dictionaries, who are these people, the wordsmiths that are creating these words? They're
I think
continuing. What I mean is they're continuing this water-based
correct.
theme.
But they say that the more common a word becomes in the vernacular, then organisations like Britannica and Oxford Dictionary and Webster's include that as being a word. But again, we go back a couple of steps. how did those words become part of the vernacular? Where did they
Yeah.
originate? So when
And
the internet was invented, for example, somebody must have used the word commonly surfing the net, which then people took on board. It's something new. Let's use that language. And sure enough, it becomes part of our everyday language.
mm, yeah. And whoever's doing it is still following this program, this theme. So then it's why are we using this in this current time that we live in? So then you look at the age we live in, and what are we living in? The age of Pisces. Now they say we're moving or have moved into Aquarius. And again, that's not like a one day you're in Pisces and then tomorrow you're in Aquarius. It's a slow process that might take 200-300 years before you sort of fade out of one and merge into the other rather than an instant, change. So I think we're in that process at the moment. So yeah, so being in the age of Pisces, it makes sense that we're connected with the water. The age reflects what's happening here on the material plane. Yeah. And I mean that might change. I'm starting to see some of the words change. We're moving in, as I said, we're moving into Aquarius. So what do we notice? We notice a lot of air-based words because Aquarius is an air sign. So that's when we start to see, cryptocurrency and money's becoming air-based rather than water-based. So
Are there any
because it's
words that are used that are related to air, or is this?
well, I'll just say like the currency that they want to adopt is air-based because it doesn't exist physically, right? I mean, where does crypto where you can't it doesn't exist in your hands. It's
Oh,
it's it's based
I understand.
in
So
the
it's still currency. It's still
yeah,
currency. It's just that we're going from water to air.
yeah, right. But I mean, I don't think I don't get into that in the book because I mean, we don't want this. It would go on forever. Otherwise, I had to sort of conclude it at some point. So I think what they're doing in changing from one age to the other is almost collapsing the current age we're in. And I mean, that was one of the things I noticed just, in the world physically, what you see in the almost collapse of the West. Civilization as we've known it seems like it's collapsing. The infrastructure, but it first shows through in the language. To me, language has been purposely degraded, and you see this in the way people use words today. I mean, with social media and their mobile phones, and sending words are broken now, and they're shortened, and they take the vowels out of the words, and people would say traditionally that the vowels are the heart of the language. So what they're taking the heart out. And there's a quote that I've put in the book, and it says, "Decline of language is the decline of the life of the people who use it." So what are they doing? They're importing a lot of people into Western countries that don't speak the language.
Mm,
That to me is a sign of them degrading the language,
mm.
right? Some people say we live, in the age of the internet or mobile phones. And what's that? What do you do with your phone initially was to make calls or to message people. So I look at that word message, mess age, the age of mess. We see that today. We see a lot of it.
Yeah,
So there's a bit of that in the book.
that's interesting. And so just just to I guess wrap it up.
Yeah, I was just going to say. So what it seems to me that they're doing
Mm,
is that this system, I don't believe will either work for them or they don't want it to work for the next stage. So they're shifting. So this is why we see a lot of chaos and changes happening in the world. So a metaphor is they're sinking the ship, basically. So you're the ship, they're sinking us because they'll need a new operating system, whatever that will be. So that could be a new language, or people say they find that difficult to believe with the power of the English language today across the world. But I mean,
so you
200 years ago, only
mm,
200 years ago, French was the international language. And
mm,
before that, it was Latin. I mean,
mm.
you can't we view things in such a short period of time that we think it's always been that way.
So are
Whereas,
you talking some kind of reset?
well, they're either going to revive an old language and see. I have a feeling it might be a Latin, and I get in the book I get to why that is the case. But so the word reset to me would make sense in that sense to move the word. All right, let's break up that word reset. So to me, it would mean to move something back to its original position or place, right? So or back to its correct position, right? Just like you reset a clock. So to me, that means you're going to use a language that existed before rather than modify, which they could modify the current language or introduce a new language, but that's not what the words are telling me. The words are telling me a reset means to go back to an existing language that, benefited, well, we can say Western civilization in the
Mm,
past,
mm.
and to go back to maybe, yeah, operating on that older system. It could be modified again. They could use that as the base and then modernize it, I guess. You know,
You could also argue that we've probably had a couple of resets in human history.
well, yeah, I mean, I think the introduction of English was a reset. The adoption of the English language and system was a reset from the one that was operating before that. Yeah, I do believe that there have been a couple.
Well, this has certainly been of interest personally to me because I love the idea of words and etymology in general, and what you spoke about earlier regarding, maritime or admiralty law, let's call it that. But I guess for listeners, if they want to read more about your work and particularly to download your book, they can visit your Substack channel, which is at substack.com/ at Phoenician Hunter, PhoenicianHunter. Navigate that page because you'll find a lot of very intelligently written articles that have been researched extremely well. So, thanks for the chat. It's been enlightening as always. I think the next chat that we'll provide to our listeners will probably springboard off of this. Have you got any final words or message?
Well, yeah, I just want to mention that for those who have read my book, I did a recent post that it's sort of a conclusion to the book, and because I didn't get into this, who is behind, I guess, the water-based spellings and why they were introduced. Now, we touched on that in our discussion where they wanted this in this invisible currency, but why? Why do they want us in this sea of currency? And the reason is, well, I explain it in the post. It's to create the world we live in because words create reality. Okay. And what's the reality that they wanted to create? Well, you just look around and what is the reality? The material world we live in. I mean, if you just look at history and where we've gone, it's just progressed into this commercial, material obsessed world. Now, who does that benefit? Well, if you're a banker or a merchant, of course, it's going to benefit you. You're going to benefit that class of people. So that makes sense why they created it this way. So that is why the spellings have been cast and why they're based on water and sea. But I explain that more in the article. So for those who are interested to see the conclusion and why, the reasons for it and how it works, you can follow up on that.
Yeah, visit your Substack channel, which, as I said, has got a lot of interesting reads there, and I encourage people to subscribe because you'll find that it goes beyond opinion, and there's a lot of research that's put into these pieces. So, and at next podcast, we'll discuss other issues. As we've mentioned in this podcast, we talk about religion, we talk about words, we talk about admiralty versus common law, etc. There's a lot more to discuss. So thanks once again, and stay tuned for our next episode.